Went to Purdue University. I managed to cram a 4-year course into 5 years. I played a lot of baseball. I wound up in engineering. I went down to be a history major. I couldn't pass Spanish. Anybody speak a foreign language here? Oh, good. There's a gentleman back there. God bless you for that. Couldn't do it. I was in Spanish class, and the instructor asked me, he said, Mr. Jackson, what was the outstanding accomplishments of the Spaniards? I looked him square in the eye and I said, I think it's the fact they learned the language. And he went, you, out. I graduated from Purdue, went to work for General Motors, and I did not care for it at all in Warren, Ohio. And I was driving, we were engaged, and I was driving home one night, and I stopped by a recruiter's office, and I saw a life-size poster of a Marine in his dress blues. This is pretty cool. I think I'd like to have that uniform. Now, I gave you a little bit of my background, so I go in the next day to my boss. I had a draft deferment. The Vietnam War was heating up, and I said, sir, here's my 2 weeks notice. I'm leaving General Motors. I'm going to join the Marine Corps. And he looked at me and he said, would you like to fly airplanes? I did not know Marines had airplanes. I said, no, sir, I don't want to be in the Air Force. I don't want that Marine uniform. And he said to me, and many of my bosses have told me this since, come here, you knucklehead. I want to explain to you how Marines learn to fly airplanes. Went to OCS, got my commission second lieutenant, went down to flight training, naval flight training. Anybody been through the flight school or naval flight training? Yeah, we got a few. There's another one. Yep. Well, that'll be some memories there. And one of the things when I went down there, the war was heating up, the Vietnam War, and they were pushing us. Did you guys go through during that time frame, before the Vietnam War was going on? Any of you? No. Well, I did, and we went through it 11 months. I remember how many of you remember your very first flight? Like it was yesterday, and they cut your shirt tail off. In the Marine Corps, they cut your tie off. But I remember my very, very first flight, like it was yesterday. I had no idea. I had no idea what to expect. I take off. I got an instructor in the back. I'm in the front seat. And let's just be honest. I was scared. I thought, what is going on here? So as I took off, my instructor says, where are you from, Lieutenant? I said, well, sir, I'm from Indiana. I'm thinking, I'm about to die. And this guy wants to know where I'm from. Maybe it's to send the body back. I don't know. So we're flying along, and I'm thinking, the only thing I've ever seen an airplane do in the movies was when it turned, it went like this, and it crashed, and it burned. So I'm sitting up there thinking, I got to fly all the way around the world just to get back to the runway, because I don't know how to turn around. And I don't have enough gas. So how's this going to work? And then he says, is that farm country? My instructor said to me, is that farm country up there? I said, yes, sir, it is. And I'm thinking, not only am I going to die, I'm going to die like an idiot. How many of you guys thought that about your instructors? Don't raise your hand if they're here. And so he says, well, what do they raise up there? I'm going, this is insane. I said, well, they raise cattle and hogs and corn and bean and hay. And then I'll never forget this. He said, Lieutenant, you are in southern Florida, and down here we raise landing gear. I forgot to bring my gear up. And you know, to this day, I have never forgotten to raise or lower my landing gear. That was good. I went to, yeah, that's right, yeah. And then another quick story about aviation and the memories you have and the things you learn that are so wonderful. And you have them, and maybe someday you'll get the microphone, but not tonight. I'm not giving it away. I remember my first carrier landing. Anybody done a carrier landing? There's one back there. You remember yours too. Well, we were in a hurry, and you go out to the ship just to set the stage. You go to the ship in your airplane by yourself. An instructor takes you out there, and You go in front of the ship, you make the brake, you turn downwind, and it's a circular pattern rather than the box pattern that we do nowadays. And the first, you have two approaches where the hook is up. So I did my first approach, and it's just a crash landing, and you kind of just bang it on, and you add the power, and you go around, come around and do it again. And at the LSO, the landing signal officer, he's on the ground looking at you. If it's okay, when you come around the third time, he'll say, put your hook down. Man, I remember dropping that hook. I'm going to be somebody. I made that pass. When I caught, there were 4 wires. I caught the number 3 wire. I went full power like you're supposed to, and the thing of it was, the Lexington was the trading carrier. She had come offline, and we were now aboard the USS Roosevelt, which had come offline in Vietnam. They weren't used to students, and students weren't used to her. So I land, I'm at full power, I'm looking around, and I'm going, I am aboard the USS Roosevelt. Look at this. And there's a guy about from here, to the gentleman with the tie on, right there. And he's giving me one of these. I'm at full power, and I didn't know, so I waved. You got it. There's no post-dispatch people here, so I'm sharing everything. So I waved, and he's giving me one of these. Now I got the deck foul. There's a guy behind me wanting to land, and I have got that cable stretched tight, and I fouled the deck. The next thing that happened, I thought I heard a voice from God, which later turned out to be the ship's captain. Here's something else he said. Do you remember this in your flight training, things that happened? He said, Lieutenant, pull the power back on your airplane. You are not going to drag my ship anywhere. Oh, okay, I get it. And flight training continued. We got our wings, pinned our wings on. My wife pinned my wings on. And then I went to New River, North Carolina to a composite squadron. That composite squadron consisted of Huey gunships and OV-10s. Went to Vietnam flying OV-10s and Cobras. Went to a place called Pine Tree, which is just east of Quezon. Flew over there for about 6 months, or 6 weeks. Was sent down to Da Nang and climbed in a TA-4, 2-seat, and we marked targets up in North Vietnam. Now, I heard this a lot. I went up there, I marked targets, and Lord, they could shoot at you there. First, it was a beautiful day. I remember the first time I saw flags. How many of you have seen flags? Well, you ain't missed a thing. Yeah, back there. You haven't missed a thing, have you? No, you smile, I'm smiling. Oh, you haven't. And it was a beautiful day, and I saw these gray clouds coming up. And I thought, that's a strange weather phenomenon. Well, they were shooting. And it got to the point where I would just put a marking round down. And just so they quit shooting at me. Because once you had a marker round down, they were looking for the bombers. So they leave you alone for a while. Anyway, did that. Then I went down to a place called Quang Tao, and the Army taught me and 5 other guys how to fly Cobras. And I got shot down twice in helicopters. I remember those days like they were yesterday. The first time was in a Huey gunship, and it was in May of 69, excuse me. And you go in pairs, and you remember the funny things when you go to combat. You guys, how many are Vietnam veterans here? You guys remember this stuff? I'm flying with a guy with Chattanooga, and he's passed away now, Agent Orange County. But they shot that thing up through the belly, and first of all, people say, did you eject? Ladies and gentlemen, you do not eject out of a helicopter. That's like a banana going through a fan. It doesn't work. So you're riding that thing down. So we're coming down, it's burst into flames, and Mel, anybody from Tennessee? Good, until let's finish the story. Mel's from Tennessee, and have you ever heard someone from Tennessee say something? It takes them a week to say a sentence. Mel comes up in a very slow Tennessee drawl. Instead of going, Mayday, Mayday, Jackson's going down, yada, yada, yada. he comes up and he says, and I quote, "Jackson, that thing's really burning. I don't think you're going to make it." Just get on the ground and pick me up. Got home, did some things with airplanes the book said you couldn't do. Went to the test pilot school in Patuxent River, Maryland. Served as a young Marine captain testing there. And I belonged to an organization called the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. And there was a grand gentleman who was our guest speaker at a symposium that day, and he needed a Harrier pilot. I was a 74th Harrier pilot trained in the Marine Corps. And oh, by the way, as a footnote, somebody says, "How was your first hover?" Well, we had the 88As, and they were hard to fly. A known fact. The Marine Corps bought 107 of them. We crashed 56 and killed 28 guys. It was hard to fly. And I was a 74th Harrier pilot trained in the Marine Corps, and Mr. McDonald, who's now passed away, had said to me, "Now, Jack, I can't offer you a job, but if you decide to get out, here's my card." So I took the card, and when I got home, my fingers couldn't get on that touchstone phone fast enough. So I went to work for McDonnell Douglas, and I was privileged over there to fly for 26 years. And many of you I have known, you helped me, and I probably, if it hadn't been for your professionalism, wouldn't be giving this speech today, because you took care of me. And I appreciate it more than you know. And so I went to work there, and that started what I call my test pilot career. I was happy enough to be able to fly this airplane, and this thing is going crazy. It's got a picture up here I don't want. Anyway, and that was the 300th Harrier we ever built. And so I got this, and that was after that first flight. And we did a lot of, you have to test and do a lot of neat things. And I can remember things getting away from me. I can remember, and you guys have been there, and don't sit there and lie to me. When you're flying an airplane, if things don't go right, many of you say, "Well, I was in complete control, and I had this," and yeah, right. There have been some times I had to go, "Okay, God, you got this," because I don't have a clue what's going on. And I'll tell you about one of those events in a little bit. But that was one of that. Man, that guy doesn't have any gray hair in the lower left there. You didn't hear that? He said he still got hair. I'm going to show you this little video here in a minute, but it was one we made out there, and it's a great depiction of the Harrier. The Harrier was my favorite jet. I flew it a lot. I got to fly it a lot. I had to eject once, and I'll tell you that story I'll just tell you right now. People ask me, "Did you eject? Have you ever ejected?" And yes, I don't know, Jim, if you were in a radio room at that time or not, but anybody else around when I ejected from B1, the prototype? Well, I was testing the airplane, and we were it was over the Lake of the Ozarks, and what happened was I was doing an engine check, and I'll describe it for you, because there's another maneuver I want to share with you tonight as we go on. And that, it was an engine, we're checking to see what the engine would do. I was at 39,000 feet. I had the throttle at idle. I was at its max, nose up, full back stick angle attack, if you will, if you're familiar with those terms, and you all are. If you're not, for those of you not familiar with angle attack, an aspirin will help. That's a joke. Don't worry about it. It was a bad joke, right? So, well, scratch that one on. Anyway, I slammed the throttle forward, and the engine surged. And I pulled the throttle back, and it kept surging. So the next thing I had to do was shut the engine off, or it was going to be this gentleman right here with the black shirt on that says Aero 1 or whatever. That guy right there, that's the color that engine was going to be if I didn't, because it was going to burn up. So I shut it off, and I rode that thing down, and my chase plane was a guy named Ben Park. He was in an F-15. And Ben said, Jack, you can't start if you get down to 20,000 feet. That was the first part. So I rode that thing down to 20,000 feet, and I tried to start. And I tried 5 or 6 air starts. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the RPM gauge was about the size of the silver dollar. And so I pushed my visor up on my helmet, and I was staring at the thing, thinking, come on, please move, please move. And Ben said, you're getting gas out the back end, but there doesn't seem to be any spark. It's not lighting. And this is not good. So I tried, and I tried, and I tried, and I rode that thing down to 2,000 feet. And I said, it's time for me and this airplane to part company. Now, the ejection seat process of that airplane, the canopy doesn't leave it like some of you would think. It had an explosive charge in the top, in the canopy, like C4, and it blew the glass away. And so the process that you use when you're sitting down, you put your head back, seat straight up so you didn't get back damage. Because the best way to describe it is 2 shotgun shells firing 2 rockets about the size of baseball bats. And you put your head back, and there's a handle right down between your knees, about the size of a horseshoe. And you put one hand on the other, and on the other, and you pull that handle, and out you went. And it was supposed to go out, and I remember this number, in 1.4 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, I assumed the ejection position, I pulled that handle, and I swear to you, 3 years went by. It didn't fire. I'm thinking, this is going to get ugly. Oh, and before that, I had, if you've ever been in sort of the central to southwest of Missouri, there's 2 billion trees down there in 1 pound. And I had my airplane pointed towards a town, so I had to move it. And now altitude was going for $1 million a foot. So I pulled that ejection handle, and when I pulled it, it didn't fire right away, so I looked down. Guess what, when I looked down? Boom, out I go. Bent over. I was 6'5" when that took place. It had stroked me down. So I was firing out of that airplane, and I felt the chute open, but I couldn't see. Well, I did have eye surgery later, but that wasn't the reason. My helmet in the ejection had come down over my face, and it had black leather in there. So I'm staring at it. Well, I pushed it back. I can see, but I can't breathe. Why can't I breathe? Well, your oxygen mask is now over your face, and all the oxygen is in a ball of flames down there. So I took my mask off. It gets worse. I took my mask off, and the first thing they do is tell you to look up and see if your canopy shoots good, which I did. I looked up, everything was great. And now I'm coming down to the trees. You do not want to come down in the trees. They tell you this in survival school and everything. Stay out of the power lines, that's pretty obvious, but stay out of the trees as well. Simply because you get a limb up under your ribs, and when your ears grow, you could come down a straddle of a limb, guys. That's not going to be good. So I thought to myself, I'm coming down to the trees, and there's a pasture over here. I have seen Santa Clauses with underneath parachutes land in the middle of football fields. I can do this. I reached up, grabbed that riser, jerked it down. The chute started to collapse. I turned loose of that riser and screamed at it, take me where you want, just don't collapse. I went clanging, banging down through the trees, and I was in kind of a red. I was about on the table height above the ground. I hooked it and fell to the ground and had on kind of a reddish flight suit. And there's cattle running everywhere. And I'm thinking, there's a bull out here. There's really upset. He is not a happy camper. Long story short, I was standing there, my face was bleeding, I could tell my eyes, I had eye surgery the next day. There were 2 guys coming running at me, one right about over here, and another guy over here. And you can't make this stuff up. The guy over here, I think he meant to say, are you hurt? But he hollered at me and said, "Are you dead?" I said, "No." And he went, "Okay," and waved and left. And this guy picks me up. Okay, I was the first person to take a prototype Harrier off the ski jump. And what they were doing, we did it for the Spanish and the British. And the object was that we had a ski jump, and we kept, where was the limits? And if I had a, and oh, by the way, if you got questions, jump right in here, because it does not matter to me. And we'll talk about it, we'll kick it around. So if you got a question about something, let me know. But what did we think? The reason for the ski jump was 8th grade physics will tell you, if you take it off this way, it takes more to go. But if you got something that's going to pitch up that way, then you're going to be able to take off with more payload. And so we wanted to see if we could put those on the end of the ships. And the Spanish and the British were really interested in this. So we set it up, we did it. Now, the engineering core was fantastic at Boeing and at Mac. So we're getting ready to do this. We don't know anything about how to do it. And they said to me, "You're going to be 120 feet from the end to go off the end." I trusted them. Shouldn't have done that. I thought the end, 120 feet was from the end of the ramp out back this way. They said 120 feet was from here to there. And I got the end and I said, "Aren't we a little close?" They said, "Oh no, that's right, we marked it off." And I said, "Well, how do I know when to pitch the nozzles down?" And the nozzles are right here. If you leave them aft and get it wrong or wait too long, it's going to come down, hit the ground, and that'll ruin your whole day. If you put them down too soon, guess it's going to pitch the nose down, and it's going to ruin your whole day. I said, how am I going to know? No one could tell me. Have you ever taken off in an airplane and heard the main strut as it lifted off the ground go ka-thunk? Well, that's what I did. I said, I don't know any other way how I got that main gear right there off of the runway. I didn't care about the nose. And as soon as I heard that main strut fully extend and go clunk, I put the nozzles down. High-tech stuff, we didn't know, we just did it. And so that was the very first time we did that ski jump and how we do it. Now, I have a question for you. What do you think was the limiting factor in this testing? Yeah, he said the ramp. Now, the level of the ramp, because we went up, this is 12 degrees. We went as high as 17. Now, why did we stop at 17? Take a guess. No, that's close, but not. It was the nose gear back here. It was the structural stress on the nose gear that when it hit that ramp, it compressed so hard, we were going to break it. And so we had to stop it at 12. I don't know where I put that up.
Do they still use that ramp anymore?
Yes, I'm about to show you, David. Right there. We took this ship, and we go off, and we put a ramp on it. And the Spanish and the British today, their carriers for the Harrier have a ramp on it. And this was one of the old ones went off, and that was when they started using the ramps to get, because they had the old Aviation, the Air Force, the Royal Air Force, the British, they bought these, and they had a bigger wing. But they all used it just so they could carry more ordnance. And it increased the payload, I think about 40%, just because the airplane's going up this way. That's a lot of bombs. Because clean, we used to carry 600 pound bombs and a 25 millimeter gun weight on the airplane when we went to war with it. A quick footnote though, I was one of the first guys to take this thing aboard a carrier. It was a Spanish carrier. And we thought we would be clever and combine and save tax dollars. So it was in a Harrier, and I was to do a gun demonstration, see how the accuracy of the gun before went to the ship with it. And a guy by the name of Art Knowles was in the Harrier before me, so I shot the gun. I just came in and landed behind him. Well, there was a Spanish commander in his found out that we had a live gun on his ship. He came out, and I can tell you to this day what he kept saying to me. You got to go see Captain. You got to go see Captain. You're in lots of trouble. You're in lots of trouble. You bring a loaded gun aboard. Okay, leave me alone. Give us a gas, I'll get rid of it. I'm out of here. That's some bombs coming off that when we cleared the airplane. That's up in a place called China Lake. And we did a lot of weapons separation testing out there. I remember the first time I shot a missile. It was actually a harpoon type thing where we're getting ready. And we hadn't planned on this, but that inlet on that Harrier is huge because it has to have that air come in. I shot that missile, and all that smoke went down that inlet and shut my engine off. And I'm at 10,000 feet. I got it lit, but man, you'd think I'd learn. That one is a cool picture. I like that. That's taken down in North Carolina at a Marine Corps base called Camp Lejeune. That's a road. And we specifically chose this road so that the outriggers, where's one? I got it here somewhere. So the outriggers were just on the white lines on the edge of the road. There's the outriggers out there. I guess you just get teased a lot about that. Training wheels on your airplane, all kinds of stuff. And I always used to say, well, when I always told everybody, it's easier to stop and then land, then stop. Anybody come close to the end of the runway on a normal conventional landing, you get the picture. So we picked it so that the outriggers were right on the side of the road. And as they come down, and that's the dust and dirt you see kicked up, we could land, and the whole concept of the airplane was to move with the ground combat element. It was to help that young Marine, the soldier, with a rifle on the ground, and we were to be there for him. And like I said, if you got questions, sing out.
Jack,
Yes.
could the airplane be flown conventionally on and off a runway with the nozzles?
Yeah.
on and aft?
Yes. Did you hear the question? The question was, could you fly it conventionally? And there were 4 types of takeoff and landing in the Harrier. The first one was conventional, and what you did was hold that airplane up. So stand up, hold it up, or Jim hold it up, somebody. Right on the side there's nozzles. There's 4 nozzles, and those come down with the lever in the cockpit. And you put them down. It's an air-driven motor. And so the first way is a vertical takeoff. You just pull the, okay, put it down, thank you. And you guys are welcome to come up and look at these afterwards. The first one is you put the nozzles all the way down. You move your hand off the nozzle lever, put the throttle, and up you go. You get to 50 feet, and then you go back to the nozzle lever, and you start nozzling out. The nozzles go from here to there, and that's one way. A vertical takeoff, obviously a vertical landing. The next way is you have the conventional. Just leave the nozzles alone, just like anybody else. Just add the power. The problem was the wing, it rotated at about 160 knots. And it landed at about 159. Yeah, I mean, and so you had to put the nozzles down for reverse thrust on a conventional landing. I've done them out here on runway 26 left, and it was a plateful getting it stopped when I needed to. And the fourth way was what we called variable nozzle. You set the power, and that meant if you didn't have enough power, you moved the nozzles. But if the airplane was not as responsive as it was with power, you'd move them slow and then hold it, wait to see what it did, then push it back or pull it back, slow it up. and control your landing with that. And that's if you were too heavy and the ordnance you had you were bringing back was too expensive to jettison, or it would not jettison, which was oftentimes the case. So there were four, to answer your question. This is the T-45 trainer. It was my nemesis for a long time, and this is a press conference, and you can see that just the cast of thousands of reporters around me. And it is now the Navy's new trainer. And this was prior to the first flight, or just after it, rather a couple days, and people want to know, this was the new advanced trainer for the Navy. How do we fix it? It's a derivative of the British Hawker. But there was a lot of changes, and a lot of it was because of the carrier. The landing gear had to be beefed up, and the engine, we had some problems with the engine spooling up. And what we found was, you'll love this, we pull the power back, and you push it up, and it just took so long to wind up, and you can't have that around a ship. You don't want that anywhere, really, in an airplane. And we couldn't figure it out. And finally one day, when I pulled it to idle, trying to make this carrier thing work, I noticed that the RPM rolled way too far back. And so the high tech, and you see I can't even operate a computer, what we did was we went down to Ace Hardware at Patuxent River, Maryland. Some of you may have been involved with it, and we bought a door hinge. And we bolted that door hinge behind the throttle, and the hinge would come forward, and it had an adjustment on it. And I could adjust where I wanted to throttle, and I pull it back, and that's too much, not enough, too much. And we set the RPM, we could do it, and change the throttle quadrant. But it took us about 3 weeks to find that problem, so we get aboard the carrier. And that's the F-18. But back to the F-15. The F-15 wing had two moving parts. The ailerons, which is obvious to those, hey, turn this way, you go that way, you turn this way, you go that way. And the flaps. And the flaps had three positions: up, take off, and land. And we had a heads-up display in it that there was a green and E. Had like the letter E in the alphabet. And there's a little symbol like an airplane that like the kids would draw. We just used to tell people, if you had 200 hours of flight time, put that little wing in the HUD on the middle of the E and land it. And we made it very easy to fly. It was a fantastic machine. It was a big brute. The thing that was beautiful about that machine, it was easy to fly. And then the F-18, I call that my Star Wars. That one right there. And the reason I call it the Star Wars machine was because the wings and the flaps and the ailerons, everything was moving. Everything was moving. And you had a heads-up display, which was telling you things. You had a glass cockpit. We had three big displays down here, and there was stuff to do. And it was pretty easy to fly, but I call it the Star Wars machine. And the reason that we made these airplanes easy to fly, if you stop and think about it, the airplanes that I'm going to get to in a minute were to just go from point A to point B. Ladies and gentlemen, the Harrier, the F-15, the F-18, the ones that I put, even the 16, I got to ride in that, they're combat airplanes. They are built to protect this country. We made them easy to fly so that you could put the bombs on the target and get home. That was our job. And everybody who worked out there at McDonnell Douglas, now Boeing, did a fantastic job. We did that very well. So I wanted to show you the old and the new. It was very special. That was the Sidewinders on a Harrier, and I had the privilege of flying almost every fighter this nation's built. And I went and flew 2 Russian fighters. Yeah, and there's cold pizza over there. Help yourself to that too. I went to Russia in 1995. And I flew 2 Russian jets. And I'm running out, I don't want to keep you all night, but it's a pretty intriguing story. The company sent me over there, and this is the Yak-38. The Harrier has 1 engine. Now, this started out, I met with some Russian people in Oklahoma City. They said, undisclosed place. I went to, it was Oklahoma City. If you've been to Oklahoma City, it's not undisclosed. And one of the interesting things, it was right out of James Bond. I thought, I am somebody, this is so cool. I paid for everything in cash, threw the receipts in a little box and brought it back to the agencies. And I can't tell you the agencies' names, but their initials were CIA and FBI. And I remember just I said, hey, I got to tell my wife I'm leaving. You know, when you go someplace, you leave a phone number where you can be reached for your spouse. And so I said, I remember now, I went to Oklahoma City. And I said, well, here's the phone number. And it was a 314 area code. I said, I'm not even in the state. That phone number's local. I said, just have her call it. We'll take care of it. So anyway, I went over there after I met with their pilots and and I flew the Yak-38 and one other airplane, the Su-27, which I'll show you in a moment. I learned a lot while I was over there. The agent, I said, why are we doing this? And the agency said the Russians, their economy was in a tank. Their whole economy is based on their military, what they built. There was no wars to fight. Nobody wanted any more AK-47s. And a footnote, when you see on television, what are the terrorists carrying? What kind of rifles? AK-47s. That's exactly right. So it was in a tank, and Russian aerospace wanted to know if they could provide us with some of their technology. Well, I got the answer even before I left from the agencies. No. Went over there. In 1995 I went, and we got there and they told us that we want you to meet a guy. Here's your code word. Do not get in a taxi by yourself. Don't go in. Do not leave the airport. This guy has a code word answer. Here's a picture of him. He has a picture of you. So we did it. Sure enough, he was there. He takes us to the hotel. It had guards all around it. I'm thinking, this is cool. They got us in 3 days, and just a bit of their economy. The interpreter, or one of the girls who was working the buffet line in the hotel where we stayed, I said to her when I'm getting breakfast or whatever it was, lunch, I said, oh, you work here, put yourself through school? She spoke very good English. She looked at me like I'd grown horns. I said, did I say something? She said, myself through school. I have a master's degree in chemistry. I can work here and make twice the money. The plot thickens. The test pilot that I met with in Oklahoma City was a Su-27 pilot, and he had a daughter and a son. That's the Su-27. And I flew that. And his daughter she became our interpreter. And because it was about 3 years later, I think she was 17 or 18. She had a driver. The guy couldn't speak a word of English, but he sure could get around Moscow and the other places. And the long and short of it was, she walked up to me the first day with this driver, and I was over there with an engineer. Oh, they were Paul Rieger. I don't know if you remember Paul, but Paul and I went. And she said, Mr. Jackson, you knew my dad. Well, her father, the guy I met with, had been killed testing an airplane 6 months before we got there. I'd been briefed on that. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, how's he doing? Will I get to see him? And she said, oh, no, he was killed. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I'm going to pick up the rest of the story when we took her and the other person home. Went and flew this jet. It's the Su-27. It was the answer to their F-15. They stole a lot of technology. You can see the leading edge flaps with an F-18. What did they want from us? They wanted our stealth. But that's a big airplane. It was a nice flying airplane. It could outperform the F-15. I did a maneuver called the Cobra maneuver. And I saw, if you remember at the Paris air shows, a Cobra snake goes up like this, and before it strikes, it goes up like this, and before it strikes, it goes back, and then comes forward. And I think it's the Hobbit that is the enemy of the Cobra snake. The Hobbit will attack when that snake goes back. I did that maneuver in this airplane. I didn't do it at 500 feet like they did at Paris and Fonville when I was over flying the Harrier. But I took it up, I went like this, I pulled it back, you push your stick, pull forward, go full left burner, go full burner, and it just powers its way out of there. What does that mean to us? That the tail authority on that thing is phenomenal. I tried it in our F-15s, right here. I got up here, I pulled back, and yeah, we did a couple of maneuver, only it was the tail. I went like this. I departed. So the key was don't go up with that thing. If you're going to fight it, don't go up. Turn. And I think, John, I briefed you on some of that stuff. It was a magnificent machine in some respects. The reason I point this out is the Russians say they weren't involved in either Gulf Wars. You see that radome? It looks like a duck's bill. How many of you know what the E2 is and the S2, where it has that big circular dish on top? Have you seen pictures of those? You know what I'm talking about? That's what that is. And I saw that very same airplane painted in camouflage. Now, why would a Russian paint a Snoop airplane with camouflage unless they weren't involved in those conflicts? I want to take you back to when I took this young lady home, this guy's daughter. She said, would you drop us off at our house before the driver takes you on back? I said, of course. She said, I'll save some bus fare. And so we drove up, and I had said to her, I said, well, how are you and your mother doing? And she said, my dad was considered a national hero for his testing. We're very well taken care of. Now, this was 1995, mind you. We drove up to her living quarters, and it was nothing more than a concrete barracks. It didn't even have outside to make it look nice. It was just concrete. There were buildings. And you could see that it was shabby. And she said, I said, I couldn't, my curiosity just ran wild. I said, how many rooms do you live in? She said, my mother and I live together. We live in a 3-room, not 3-bedroom, 3-room house. And with that, I couldn't stand it anymore. And I said, can you tell me what you pay for rent a month for that? She said $25 US a month. I said, what's your electric bill? She said, what, $5? It was a third world country. We didn't know. We found some, when you fly airplanes, folks, and the whole purpose I'm here tonight is, I love airplanes. On a professional level, that's what I do. That's what I did. And you meet some pretty cool people. I'm going to brag here a minute, but I'm sure you recognize that guy. I had him as my guest down to when I was a state rep. I had a question back there. And you see who it is? That's Tony LaRussa. And that's me. And that was a person who helped me sponsor Tony, and that was the Speaker of the House at the time, Roger. That right there, he just passed away recently, Bob Barker, the Missouri guy. I flew him. Now, ladies, there's this lady right here, I flew her in a 2-seat Harrier. She's the Undersecretary of Navy for Manpower. So Ryan, we did all that. It was quite a, I gotta get this. And I've flown over 200 congressmen and senators. This is one of my favorite pictures. You probably don't remember this guy. But that's General Tommy Frank at the end of the first Gulf War. Arlene and I got to have dinner with him, and he was quite a guy. This young lady over here was Undersecretary for Reserve Affairs in the United States Navy. We flew her. Now, you probably can't see this guy, but if you watch Fox News, that's Ambassador John Bolton. And you can see I flew in one of the jets. Now, so there are some side benefits to the passion of flying. And I think it's just phenomenal. That's me doing an air show down at the Capitol Building in Jefferson City. And it's a pretty cool picture. Here's another one that I like that you may be more familiar with. And got to do the picture of flying up close to the arch. And that's the first flight on the radar version of the Harrier. Jim, you were flying a radio room then. Help me out. Jim's going on to bigger and better things. He flies airplanes now. That is kind of my experience as a combat pilot and as a test pilot, some of the things that I got to do. How did that fit into commercial aviation? That was one of that. That's Chieftain. That was the first one I bought. And you really learn a lot about aviation when you fly one of those. Because there's cow flaps, and there's props to manage, and there's mixtures, and if it's too hot, it won't start. If you flood it, and then everybody in the back gets mad, and how it starts when it's hot in here. And the other thing I learned about, do I have any commercial ATV pilots here? Guys who, there's one back there. I learned this real quick, my friend. When I was flying test pilot, and even in Vietnam, the weather got real bad, we stayed home. Everybody did. But I remember the first time I went flying in this jet, which was my next one. That's Jackson Hole, Wyoming, back there. The guy who taught me how to fly, we were out one day and we were going someplace, and I said, hey, the weather is 300 overcast and a mile. He said, so? I said, you're going to this? Why do you even bother checking? He said, well, I just want to know what it is, but we're going. And that was the big difference for me in commercial aviation. The fact that weather, like yesterday, I flew an Eclipse 550 up to Indiana, and the weather when I got up there was 300 overcast and 3/4 mile. And I, no offense to the guys who did autopilots, but I don't trust them. On a beautiful day, they work like a champ. When the weather's bad, they kick off line. About 800 feet from the ground, every time. So I hand flew it, and you get used to that. That was one of the big differences. And I'll tell you another story, though. How many of you do group coordination? Know all about it. There's a guy, he's a young man there. I wish I'd have learned it at your age. I went down, a guy, a friend of mine here on the base, said, would you go get checked out in the Lear 60? I need a Lear 60 pilot. I'd retired from the Boeing company. And I said, well, sure, I don't know. What about a Lear 60? Didn't know much about it. I go down to Texas. How many of you have done crew coordination? There's Jim, and there's another guy, and several hands. You've done crew coordination. I had not. So the first time, I'm in a simulator, and I take off, and I raise my gear, raise my flaps, and the instructor stops the simulator. And I'm in it, and they make it, you never get to see it a beautiful day, so I'm in the goo, and the instructor stopped the simulator. He said, Mr. Jackson, what are you doing? And so I'm looking, am I upside down? Did an engine fall off? Is there a fire light? Is there a caution? I can't find anything. And finally says, I don't know. What I do wrong? He said, you raised your landing gear. And I thought, what? And then he points to the guy sitting next to me. Well, I didn't know. We were just going through our typewriter. And he said, this guy's supposed to do that. Well, I lost it again. You can figure right now, I let my alligator mouth overload my hummingbird brain quite a bit. If you don't think so, we'll talk to my old boss, Rudy Hogue. Anyway, I looked at this guy, and I said, buddy, I've been raising and lowering my landing gear for 30 years. Now, if you forget to bring it up, I don't care. But if you forget to put it down, the word roadkill is going to take on a whole new meaning to you. With that, I get a tap on the shoulder, and the instructor says, we got to talk. Pull me out of the instructor, I got a 2-hour brief on crew coordination. And it's simple. In fact, I don't play well with others. Anyway, that was my Ultra that I flew for a while. And that was my first jet that I flew, and you can see it was in the rain, kind of like right now. But it was going to the commercial end of it. I learned that the mission was totally different. Was to put bombs on the target. It was to get yourself and the people you were flying safely, regardless of the weather. The only thing is I wouldn't be challenged. I had an incident when I was flying a Learjet, guy down in, we took him down to Atlanta. You ever been to Atlanta in the summer? You get thunderstorms and it just gets messy. And all I ask of the people is just, give me a half hour so I can get a spot, get the jet ready, and we'll go. Well, this guy didn't, and I could, by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the storms were building up, it's black everywhere. Finally, I just said to the ground crew, like James, they pushed this to hangar. By the time the hangar door started closing, this guy shows up. We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. And I leave this with you because there are going to be people, and you've had them, some of you I know. Here's a lesson. I'll share it with you because that's what pilots do. This guy said, gotta go. And I said, no, we're not going. Go to dinner, do something, but we're not going till these storms pass. As those storms came through, they ripped doors off. They even pushed the little airplane into the side of the hangar. It was a mess. So this guy comes back, we're towing the storms are through, we're towing it back. He never said anything. He gets on, I get on, I go pilot, right away. Landed back here, and when we got out of the airplane, he hands me a $100 bill. Now this is the part that my wife really struggles with. I took it, and I handed it back to her. And I said, you can fly with me again, but don't ever challenge me. Because if I say we're not going, we're not going. What's that old saying? I'd rather be down here wishing I had it on than up there wishing I hadn't. So, you guys are in control. And if it's not right, you're not comfortable, the lesson I will leave you with is don't go. And don't fight people you don't like. I'll tell you about the fat lady and the dog another time.